Okay, so when I originally did this repair, I thought I had the microphone on my microscope, but I did not. So I'm going to do my best to cover everything as I was discussing it during the repair. But what I'm doing here is I'm repairing an Game Gear that was recapped, and after being recapped with all new caps, it would turn on for a second and shut off. So the likely suspect became the power board, since I pulled all the caps off and checked it. And I'll discuss later on how to test these pins for the right voltage, but that is the dead giveaway on if your power board is functioning correctly or not. So what it led to is the IC right here needing to be replaced along with these small transistors. These you can buy this kit from a company in the UK that comes with the IC chip here, along with 3 different transistors. There's an A transistor, B transistor, and a large transistor right below the IC chip. Here's a look at the IC chip, the new one that came from that company in the UK, and this is what we're going to be putting in place of the other one. Okay, so for the first step of removal, we need to get some flux on this to reduce the melting point of the solder. So we're going to get some flux all around this, and then we're going to get the heat gun out and heat it up to where we can pull the IC off the board. And at this point I realized I didn't have any of my brushes handy, so I just made do with my pliers or tweezers to spread it out a little bit. Once the heat hits it, it will spread out more than I'd like it to. So I'm grabbing the heat gun. And I'm still fairly new with the rework station, so obviously there's going to be some stuff I do that probably wouldn't be recommended. But I am taking it slow to just start warming the area up. You can see the flux spreading out. I can't remember the exact temp I had it on. I want to say it was probably in the 420 range with a pretty low airspeed. I'm a little hesitant with the airspeed after a debacle with the Xbox One X retimer chip and blowing some resistors off the board. Okay, you can see the solder is melting up. Get my tweezers out and pull it off the board. And we've got liftoff. There's the old chip. And now we got to clean the solder off of the pads. So we're going to use a solder wick. Now I did just buy a new tool, Hacko desoldering gun, but I'm not using that in this video. I find sometimes the soldering wick works great. I guess it depends on the board, and sometimes it's a pain. I think one thing I've learned is that you probably need a larger tip on the soldering iron to disperse the heat quickly on some of these boards that you're using it on. I learned that the hard way on the Xbox. Okay, so that's pretty darn clean. And then we're going to get some 99% alcohol, clean that up. Oh, I guess I was anal and wanted to get the last bit off of there. bear in mind I am very new to soldering. As you can see, the melted wire harness there, and I think I'll do some more damage to that plastic housing on the wire harness later. But I watched a few videos on how to do this, and it seemed to work alright. So what I did was apply solder to the first pad, and then grab the IC chip. And in the spirit of not editing out my mistakes, you'll notice that I at first install this chip backwards. So I believe I called myself an idiot, and then I pulled it off afterwards. But yeah, you can see I've got it backwards. It was originally placed with the lettering and stuff in the other direction, but I don't figure that out until I melt the first post. So just leaving it in there so you can see the mistake. I will say this microscope I bought is phenomenal. I love this thing. I'm finding excuses just to do projects. So the video I saw in the past was basically you get one of the pads with solder on it, and then you get the IC connected at that one pin, and then you just alternate sides so you don't have too much heat going to, and as you can see there, it's not exactly straight. So I think I fixed that, or maybe this is where I realized that I've got it backwards. I think it may be where I realized I've got it backwards. Oh, nope, not yet. And of course I wouldn't figure that out until I get it perfectly centered. And I think right about now is where I'm, you idiot! Why did you install that backwards? Yeah, see, that's where I'm, moron. So here we're going to pull it off and flip it around. And to readjust where I was grabbing. Off she goes. I went ahead and left that solder in place. Flipped it around. I ordered some new tips as well for my Hacko station, soldering station. Some smaller fine point tips. So that's pretty perfectly centered there. And it looks pretty good. I think maybe a little bit to the right, but that's pretty acceptable. So what I do from here is I go to the opposite side. Again, that video I had watched in the past said to alternate sides to distribute the heat, so you're not putting too much heat on it. And I had to adjust my soldering iron on a couple of these because yeah, like right there, that looks like garbage. I can't remember if I touched that. I think I touched that up, flipped the IC around. Yeah, we're going to take a look and see how bad that solder joint is. I mean, it's pretty bad, so we're going to fix it. That's where I think I realized maybe I need to turn the board around. No, I guess not. There we go. Now that looks a hell of a lot better. Okay, again with changing to the other side to make sure heat is distributed. Yeah, I go to the next pin there. I guess the idea is you want to heat the pad and then sort of melt the solder into it. You can see the solder change. Well, that's not bad. So as I'm doing this, I'm going to keep alternating back and forth. You'll see where I screw up and two of the legs get connected to each other. But later on, I'm going to put a schematic up to show you which pins need to be at what voltage to kind of give you a idea on how to diagnose the power board. And once you know what you're looking for on that, it's pretty easy to find out if you got a problem with your power board or not. But I think this may be where I screw up the legs. Let's see. No, maybe it's the next one. So anyway, I'll pop that schematic up with the voltage settings later on in the video. Actually, you know, let's go ahead and do it right now. We'll go ahead and put it in. I'm going to pause this for a second. Those are the pins that you're going to want to test for voltage readings. And on mine, for example, the voltages wouldn't even stay consistent. They would actually start high and then drain low. And it was very sporadic. I couldn't get any solid voltage, and this is after replacing the capacitors. So I only could assume that it was something with the transistors or the IC, since that's a common occurrence. So what you want to do is you want to take your multimeter and test the ground. You want to put the ground on one of these ground pins to the right, and then test the pin number 9 and make sure you're getting 34 volts, and then test pin 2 and 1 and make sure you're getting around 5 volts. And if you're not getting that, then you've definitely got something wrong with the power board. Now, whether or not it's the IC or something else, the transistors, that we'll discuss that later, but hopefully that gives you an idea on how to diagnose it. Okay, so we're going to carry on here and continue with soldering the pins, and I think we're coming up on where I screwed the pooch here, and oh no, not yet. I think it's on the right side of the same side here, so I'm just going to let the video run, and feel free to critique my process and whatnot. Again, I'm brand new at soldering, so I'm going to make mistakes, but all in all, I think this project turned out pretty good. Mom's Game Gear is working, and I'll discuss that at the end of the video. I know some people fast forward through this stuff, but I tell you, I probably learned more from watching the very long videos and seeing what people did. So I'm not going to fast forward. You guys are welcome to fast forward through the video if you want to get past this. Here's where I screw up, and I see I connect the legs. Can't remember exactly how I fixed it, if I just pulled it away or if I got a solder wick. I think I may have gotten the solder, yeah. I thought I removed enough so I can maybe just pull it down and separate the pins. Oh, I got a flux pin out to properly reheat that solder. Come on. Oh, more wick. I apologize for the video jumping around. I ordered a set of helping hands from Banggood.com from China, and that was about 2 months ago, and I think it's finally inbound. So that looks a lot better there. I definitely pulled this solder off the middle, and I'm pretty sure I reheat each post. Yeah. That looks better. Probably a little heavy on the solder, but still looks better. Yep. Okay, carrying on. I think I had to clean my tip there because I put the solder too high up on the soldering iron. Yeah, I think I had to readjust how I was feeding the solder in to get it over that wire harness. And then I roll the tip, and nope, didn't work. I think this time I get it. There we go. Again, just continuing alternating pins on opposite sides to make sure not too much heat is put on any part of the chip. Screw it up again. This is amateur hour. Roll it in, and it worked pretty good there. I think these go a little smoother, if I'm not mistaken. Yeah, it looks a little light. There we go. So before I took on an Xbox project, which I initially fixed and then later destroyed after the retimer failed the second time. This is my only thing, the only thing I've really done that's serious soldering. I've done speaker wire and things of that nature before, so, you know, again, I'm going to be making mistakes. So looks like we got 3 pins left here. I think I roll that one in, roll it in. Yeah, there we go. Too bad. I think we're down to the last one here. All right, well that takes care of that. I think that's where I come in and clean it with some alcohol, I believe. Yep. So the next thing we're going to take on is the large transistor, and this one's probably more challenging than the other two. Now, I guess you could probably look at the transistors that you get in the replacement kit, and you'll notice that there's a huge ground plane under this one here that's not on these other ones, so that makes it more difficult. Okay, so we're going to start on the large transistor, which at this point I've already put flux on it. And I'm starting by trying to use a solder wick. if I can avoid using the air rework station on some of the stuff I do, just so I don't do stupid things like melt the plastic harness that you saw earlier. Now, this was pretty tricky, and at the time I don't think I realized that the ground plane went all the way underneath this thing, so that I think it was kind of a losing battle to use the solder wick. I'm sure it probably could be done, especially somebody who has more experience than me. But that's a lot of solder to pull out from underneath there. And I've still got a lot to learn with the solder wicks. It's actually how I damaged the Xbox One X I was doing the retimer chip on. Is trying to remove the solder from the pads, and I ended up ripping one of the pads off and then a second pad. Trying to continue to remove the solder from the post here on the transistor. I think at this point I just test to see if it's loose at all. And then I realize, no, that ain't going to come off that way. I may try some more wick, or I can't remember if I go into the rework station. Let's see. Rework it is. And there's already some flux on there. I may add some more though. Nope. I guess basically I'm just mainly getting that ground plane underneath the transistor heated up, so it'll come off of the pads. Again, probably around the same temperature. I don't remember the exact temperature I had, but it was in the 400s with a very low airspeed. Probably 19 or 20 is what I had it on, something like that. Once I get more confident with the rework station, I'll be a little bit more willing to up the airspeed. And there she goes, and you can see that massive ground plane. You can see how it'd be pretty difficult to pull that solder out of there. So now we're going to get the soldering wick, and I think I'm trimming it. Get those pads cleaned off. Being that I'm a novice, I don't know everything about it. I'm assuming, my assumption is that they always clean the pads off to make sure you have a very good solder joint. You don't want to use aged solder, and I guess it has something to do with the flux in the solder. Makes a really solid connection when you initially heat it up because it has a flux core. Someone can correct me if I'm wrong on that. Those are pretty well cleaned up. I'm going to, oh, there's some Hacko tips coming in the mail. Alright, that's my bent Hacko T18 tip that's arriving today. So I'm cleaning that off. And then I don't even think I would even attempt to do this without the rework station. I mean, I guess if you know what you're doing with the soldering iron, you might be able to make it work, but that's a pretty stinking big ground plane. So I'm shooting in some flux paste. Just used this for the first time the other day, and this stuff is flipping amazing. Now, the one mistake I made here is I used too much. And it's easy to do. You think, well, the flux is going to melt, and then you're going to just be left with these little stainless, or not stainless, but these balls of solder. But I misjudged it on this one here. I'm going to have to start using less as I have it, and hope that it's enough. I'm just trying to spread it out evenly. to get it away from the other components here. Oop. Something nasty on the tweezers. Still there. I think it was at this point that I made a really inappropriate solder paste penis joke, so I didn't want to leave that out of the actual video because that was pretty good. I laughed myself. Okay, so I think we're getting the transistor in place here. Now again, that's too much soldering paste. Don't put that much on it if you use it. And you'll see why in a few minutes. Still second guessing myself on the soldering paste. Okay, so here's the new transistor, and appropriately it has a BJ on it. And now we got it in place, so we're going to start watching the soldering paste work its magic. Again, I don't think I've changed the temp on the gun. It's somewhere in the low 400s, I'd say, 420-ish, something like that, with a low airspeed. You can see the flux start to melt, or disperse, whatever you want to say it's doing. Starting to solidify. I swear I love this soldering paste. It is so nice. It's starting to work its magic. There she's looking at. Now you can see where I have way too much soldering paste on the that went to the top pin up there, and especially when I push a little pressure on the chip. Yeah, so I think ultimately I did try to clean it up a little bit, but I'll show you here in a bit. We checked for continuity to see if there's any bridges in the solder. So yeah, way too much soldering paste. I'm not sure why I was doing that, but I think I bring the wick in, try to take some of that away. Oh no, okay, we got some flux pen. So I'm gonna just try to reheat it a little bit. Again, I really probably should have just tested for continuity instead of messing with it, but I wanted it to look a little better than that. I think I'm just going to reheat the pads down here to make sure it's nice and clean. Okay, I think that's pretty much done. Let's see if I test it here. I can't remember if I do or not. Nope, I'm still persistent wanting to get rid of some of that solder. There's some. Yeah, still at it. It does look a little better, but yeah, still too much. Clean it up, hopefully. Oh no, I'm testing for continuity now. Since I don't have the audio when I filmed it, we're going to just simulate it. Beep! We're good. Okay, so we're moving on to the small transistor. I believe if you buy this from the same company I bought it from the UK, this is considered transistor A in the kit. So we're going to solder wick it after putting some flux on it. Now these two smaller transistors do not have that middle ground plane, and I didn't know that at the time. I should have looked at the chips, but so they're a lot more, I guess, reasonable to do with a soldering iron versus a rework station. Alright, so it looks like we got a decent amount of the solder off, but I don't know that that's enough. I think I have a scary moment here in a minute. That looks like it came out pretty good. Yep, see right there, I'm like, oh crap, did I just pull the pad off? Yeah, a little bit of a pucker moment. Thankfully, I don't believe I damaged anything. It looks like I did because it left an imprint there on the pad. But I did not. So we're going to finish clearing the solder now that the transistor's out. Okay, now it's time to clean it up. Now this, I believe I do similar to the IC chip in that I start with one leg with putting solder on it. I'm also having to be very careful because that's the DC power input box there. And I don't want to melt it as bad as I melted everything else. And that's why I was hesitant to use the rework station. And there, the transistor stuck to my soldering iron, so that didn't work. And the, just while I'm thinking about it, the microscope I believe is an Andon Star 402. I love this thing, it's phenomenal. I installed it on a custom mount so I have more work area and it gives me more flexibility. but it does shake a little when I bump it. No way around that. And there we go, we got that top pin. Bottom left leg, it looks like. Probably cleaning my tip on my soldering gun, or soldering iron. Oh, didn't get enough off. Beat the pad. There we go, that looks good. Okay, that looks good too. So transistor A is done. We're probably going to clean it up. Oh, now we're going to refinish it. I don't think I do redo the out end here, redo the bottom joint. Okay, so now we're moving on to transistor B. Get some flux on it. I should have just used the rework station here, but I didn't want to heat the plastic housing of the DC input up. This one's a little more stubborn than the one I just did. Looks like it took a good deal of the solder off there. So there, I think I'm going to test and see if I can pull it off, but I'll soon find out that it's still got a little bit of solder on it. I don't want to rip the pads off. I even try to heat and then just sort of pull. It's a no-go. Looks like I may have even added some extra solder. This one actually shows movement, if I remember right. Maybe not. Oh, I haven't given up yet. Pretty good. I'll say it one more time. I welcome feedback from anybody who wants to comment and give suggestions on how I should do things better. Again, this channel is going to be about me learning to solder and sharing some of the experiences I have with soldering. I know there's a lot of people out there that have professional videos that show you exactly how to do things, this and that. Well, I mean, it's kind of not realistic, because as you learn, you're going to screw stuff up. And if I can maybe document some of the screw-ups I've made to save you from making them, then I think that might be helpful. So again, just feedback is fine and welcome. And then we're going to test it one more time to see if it comes off, and then I think I finally call it quits and just pull out my reworkstation. So I guess I should say that the reason I got into this is to fix my Xbox, which I ultimately destroyed, but I got another motherboard I'm gonna repair, and I may eventually try to repair the one I damaged. But I bought all this equipment to fix my Xbox, and then it really piqued my interest in soldering. So I found some more things to work on, and I've been enjoying it. You can see the lower left leg did move a little bit, but I'm just not willing to pull this off of here and rip the pads. So I think after this go here, I do pull out the rework station, which I have it's one of the ones that you always see on the benches of these people in the videos. You can see some movement in that top leg. I'll try to put some links in with the equipment that I have. Yep, so here's where I threw in the flag and got the rework out. I believe, I can't remember if I put flux back on it. I should have. Yep, a little bit more flux. Let her know I didn't screw that up. Okay, so we got a hold of it. We're going to get the, yeah, there you can see the heat starting to hit it. There's my nozzle. I think I may have lowered the temp a little bit and the airspeed just so I didn't melt the plastic housing right there, and I'm being very careful to not hit it. And I don't really want to blow up the capacitor. There it is. It's off. You can see it looks like the legs are still in the pad, but it's not. I think it's just the indentation of what it left. So we're going to clean that up. Okay. The other two pads. Clean it up here at this point with some 99% alcohol. Yep. Okay, so now we're going to place the transistor. This is transistor B. If you bought the same kit from I can't remember what it's called. I'll have to put the link in the video because the owner of that company is super nice, and I would love to see him get some business. I think it's Retro 6. Let's see if I can look that up while this is playing here. Yes, and I believe his name is Luke. And that the owner, it's called retro6.co.uk, and they sell a bunch of handheld vintage retro repair parts and accessories. And I think he even said he's going to be making a USB powered Game Gear board in the near future if you're interested in that. But super nice guy, I can't say that enough. He was very nice in email communications. Okay, so we got the top post. I think I'm adjusting just to make sure it's nice and centered. It's still not centered, it needs to go up a little bit. And I should say I ordered that kit from Retro 6, and it really only took like 3 or 4 days to get to the States. So incredibly fast shipping and great service. And you gotta love a guy that puts kits like this together. I couldn't find the kit anywhere else. Even at that lower left leg. There we go. Maybe a little heavy. There we go. A little heavy there too. Oh, I guess I'm going to try to take some of that off. I apologize for not having the really cool accents that some of these people have on YouTube. A couple of them, man, they have me laughing with some of the comments they make. The guy over at EEV blog with his sponge comments is hysterical. Alright, so we're just reheating the solder with some the flex pen hitting it and getting that nice and shiny, and then at this point I should be cleaning everything up. Everything is in place, so we check that for continuity. We're good there even though it's heavy on the top. Everything looks pretty solid, so I just need to give it a good cleaning, reinstall, or just power up and I can test the pins on it. So there's the capacitors. Now I replaced those right before, before I was still having problems, but I replaced them, and as you can see, the polarity's right on those. And I think hopefully we're cleaning things up. Scrub-a-dub-dub. Okay, looks pretty good. Aside from too much solder on some of those joints, but for my first time I even cleaned up the back here because some of the flux leaks through the holes. Nice and clean. So after testing the voltage on the pins, like discussed earlier in the video, I still got erratic voltage numbers. So I added desperation because at this point I had pulled every capacitor off that I replaced on the entire game gear, including the power board. Tested the capacitance of each and every one of those. They all tested within the numbers that they needed to be at. Still didn't work. So out of desperation, the kit that I got with the ICs came with new capacitors for the power board from Retro 6 UK. I decided to swap those out. As soon as I swapped those out, even though those capacitors that were in there that I had already replaced tested with the capacitance, swapping them out fixed the problem. So I guess before you get into the IC repair and the transistor repair, you may want to just consider, even if the capacitors are testing capacitance, just try replacing them, because for some reason those capacitors I put in there did not work. It was a kit from eBay that had the higher quality. I think it's like Nishikan or something like that, Japanese made capacitors. Still, that fixed the problem like that. So after I replaced those capacitors, everything functioned fine, so at least I know I did replace the IC chip and the 3 transistors correctly. So anyway, I'm going to continue to post videos like this. Again, I'm an amateur. I got some pretty cool gear. I found a reason, an excuse with the Xbox to buy some cool gear. So I'm going to slowly get better at soldering, and if you want to follow along, offer feedback, I'm open, because that's how I'm going to get better, is if people that are better than me provide feedback, and then hopefully some people who are just starting can learn from the videos I post as well.